Good morning. I hope all of you have your bingo cards. Rick and I are going to take turns calling numbers. And the winner is the new senior pastor of Christ Lutheran. You didn't realize that was what this was about. Well, again, thank you very much for taking time to come and be here with us. Rick and I are glad to be here, and we're very impressed and excited to see so many of you come to hear and listen to what we want to share with you. I want to give kudos to Noel. Excellent sermon today. He's not here, so let's talk about it. But I loved it. You know, don't worry, but not don't worry, be happy. But don't worry, everything will be all right. So part of our job today, we're not going to eliminate your worry. We're not going to necessarily eliminate your anxiety, but we're going to address some of that so you might be less worried or have lower anxiety because of what we're doing. So kudos to your leadership. To be proactive in the anticipation of a transition of a leader, bringing in firms such as ours, along with Rick and his skill set in doing searching, national searching for leaders, puts you in a very, very, very strong position, especially as a Lutheran church in today's challenges and culture. So that in and of itself should lower some of your stress, not because of Rick and Jeff, but because of the fact that this process is in place, and that's a huge benefit. So don't worry, everything is going to be all right, and I am very positive about that. So four things we're going to want to do today. One, let you know what we did. Let you know not everything we discovered, but some of the things we feel are important for you to hear that we learned as we listened, and then to let you know what we're doing next. This isn't the end, this is kind of the beginning of the next phase of our work together, and then let you have questions. We know you have questions. We've heard about some of them, so we want to make sure we give you time to ask some of those, and hopefully you'll have questions. Hopefully we'll have some answers, or at least give you some understanding around those questions. Okay? Does that sound good? Well, that's good, because that is what it is. I can't alter. I could alter my screen time. Okay. So the overall intention of this time that we've spent so far is all about discovery. There's two levels of discovery here. One is the discovery of how do you understand yourselves? How do you see Christ Lutheran? What's your relationship to it? What's your investment, your hope for it? And then what do we do to take that to another level as you think about a new leader? The other focus of discovery is what are those things that Rick especially needs to hear and learn about the attributes of a leader, especially as we think about that leader in the future, and Rick will talk more about that. So that was the real focus, and we had some methodology, some strategy to that. 4 elements of our, what we call listening, learning strategy, our process. First is to just engage your leadership, and I did that the first couple of visits. This is my 4th visit now. First couple of visits was spending some time with your staff, your leadership, to learn what's in play, what's in the water, where's their thinking, where's the anxieties, where are the anticipations. All those kinds of things are very helpful. What are the expectations? I met with council and learned about some of the hope and expectation they have, some of the fears, anxiety they have, all of that to help us as consultants be in a better position to not just take care of those needs, but to know how we can go forward with the work we're doing. So we spent time with leadership, and we assembled a transition team, and much of this work is thanks to the work that that transition team did to put together the listening sessions and all of those things. And before I forget, is Amy here? Amy, can you introduce our team? Is that possible, or should we just say stand up and then introduce themselves? Stand up, leadership team, transition team, I'm sorry, if you're here. We want to give thanks to these people. These are so Amy, Lauren, Shannon, Paul, Michael, Leslie, and Sabina, and Joe, and
we added Norm.
we had two more. Norm.
Yeah, Norm and Mike were addition.
Okay. So they were helpful in getting all this work put together. We met with many people. And it was their job to help set that up, and now they have work to do with me going forward. And also kudos, Michael, fabulous special music today. Wow. So whenever we meet, we get to have you open us up with the tune to get us settled. All right, so we met with leadership. We put together the transition team. We got the process in place. The very first thing we did was the map. How many of you took that online map? Missional assessment profile. We had a great response. I came back and did an interpretation of that. Rick will talk about this for his turn. He conducted MCODE, which is an assessment. I'll let him explain what it is, but we conducted that with a number of your staff people. That was a very valuable process in setting up this next work with the call committee. And then we did what we call deep listening, which is we spent time one-on-ones and in group sessions listening to you. We had excellent participation in that. So what I'm going to do is share back to you some of the learnings from all of these things that we have done. And then we will let you have some questions. If you have a question while I'm brain dumping on you, please raise your hand or shout it out, that's fine. And we can address that question now. So what we did is try to discover what's the DNA, what's your understanding of Christ Lutheran's DNA. There's some fundamental elements of DNA. I'm not using a PowerPoint, sorry. So if you're looking for what, put Minneapolis up there, St. Paul. The Packers got beat today. I tell you, as a Vikings fan. So we looked at your current mission statement, the values you've created, core values, but we wanted to know how you articulate that. And see, here are some testaments to what you shared, and what we share back is kind of that what rises to the top and what seems to be some consistency. So here are some things that you shared about yourselves. A very accepting, warm, and welcoming people marked by a deep sense of community, fellowship, sense of belonging. This spirit has been consistently present throughout its history. Key core sense of your DNA. A church with a big heart, where people are not afraid to start things and step up to the plate to utilize their gifts and talents. A generous and giving church. Progressive, and we talked about this in different sessions, you know, whether you're progressive or liberal, and the term was, you like that sense of being a progressive church was what was more comfortable. Forward-thinking theologically and socially in a more conservative context. Non-judgmental and committed to diversity, openness, and inclusion while valuing Lutheran tradition. And remember, these are going to be things we're going to be using to mark key as we find and identify candidates. Trending toward an aging demographic. I'm not sure. But the church remains strong with a deep desire to engage younger families. Very, very true. A very strong youth ministry attracting not only young people from the congregation, but the broader community as well. Big celebration that was shared across the board. Engaged in a myriad of service and outreach in the community, addressing the social needs, see themselves as the hands and feet of Jesus. Another sidebar is this report will be shared to the council, our leadership teams, and will be available to you upon request. So there'll be an e-file or a hard copy if you wish of this. We prefer not to share that in advance. Well-educated members and known as a thinking person's church, where people are well-read and thoughtful, marked by excellent preaching and teaching. That is a very defining character. A church that is well-run and structured without being rigid, offers a strong preschool with a great reputation in the community, currently offers 2 Sunday morning worship experiences at 8 and 9:30 with a mix of traditional and contemporary worship, and then you are home to a Lahu ministry with a culturally relevant worship experience and leader for that community. And we did meet with the Lahu community and their elders as one of our group sessions. So those are just general, what we would call DNA attributes that you yourselves shared about yourself. You don't have to agree with all of those, but that's what we felt filtered up and were consistent. Here are some things that we learned from the map. One of the best things about the map is that 182 of you took it. So that gave us really strong confidence in the data, the reliability of the data, and the insights that it gives. Just a few things that I wanted to lift up about that, and I just referenced this. CLC is a highly educated culture. That shows up on the map data because we asked that question. You have 80+% of you have at least a 4-year college degree. Almost 50% of you have a master's. So that's a highly educated culture. This is a strength for deep discernment, but it can be challenging when it comes to making timely decisions. Because you love to dialogue and discern and make sure every voice is heard. And for consultants, that can be a nightmare at times. Nearly 20% of respondents have become a part of CLC in the last 6 years. This is a positive sign in health and growth potential. Every ELCA church in the country would want that as one of their percentage. 20% have joined or become a part of this faith community in the last 6 years. That's huge. Less than 16% of households have children under the age of 18. Obviously a critical area for growth, and that was shared universally by you, that you noticed that, you're yearning and looking for how that can change, and you're not alone in that, you and every other ELC congregation in the country. CLC is in the possibility landscape. Now, if you were here for my interpretation, I have this little continent that has possibilities, nostalgic, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting my 4 quadrants. That's really too bad, I should put up here. Here's the 2 that you are in. Possibility landscape towards nostalgic. So you are in the possibility landscape, which means you're poised for growth, to do things, but you're in this gravity pull of nostalgia where you tend to look backwards to remember and think about your strength and your assets and your health, and look to those days to help kind of assess how you are today. And that can be a danger to let you become comfortable or settled rather than stay in that land of possibility that continues to push you into new opportunities. Overall, the respondents have a very positive feeling about CLC and the impact it is making. So very, very, very strong affirmation when asked to reflect how they feel about the mission of the church, the impact you're having, making a difference in people's lives. Very, very positive. Well over 90% overall of affirmation. There are indicators that sharing different opinions and offering new ideas are not fully embraced or welcomed. So we talked about that. One of the things we'll want to be mindful of as we go forward is how is that experienced now when you're going to be looking at making changes, wondering about your future in new and different ways, different ideas are going to be coming forward. How is that navigated and experienced? Not a negative, just something that we will want to be mindful of. Implementing change is seen more as a stress factor or being unnecessary than a way of learning and growing. So again, not a negative, just a characteristic of change is non-optional, and now it will be inevitable for sure, it always is anyway. And so how do we help you as a culture embrace the reality of change and understand that there's going to be some stress factors there, and that's okay. There's going to be some stumbles, some mistakes, that's okay. That's not failure, that's learning, that's how you grow, and you definitely are in this moment of positioning yourself to grow in new and different ways as you imagine being led by a new and different leader. Clear communication regarding decision making and planning need to be improved, and that's pretty much across the board in churches around the country. And generosity is a strength, but there is definitely significant room to grow. So these are the insights that I wanted to lift up from the map. If you want that map, hard copy is available with all the data, as well as a copy, or is the recording of my interpretation still in the world? Yeah, I think it went viral. I'm pretty sure it went viral. Rick's going to share about thankful insights for his time. So areas for growth and opportunities. We also wanted to hear from you to say where does this congregation need to pay attention? Where are those opportunities, places to kind of move ministry? Just a few thoughts on that. So these are growth areas. Giving more resources and priority to children's ministry. That was a fairly widespread, not just concern, but hope that you can figure out how that can happen. Engaging families with children more intentionally, with special attention given to nurturing those adult relationships. One of the very first group, I think it was, that Rick and I met with, were your young adult.
They were the 2030s.
2030s. Yes. It was a great group, but obviously a group that just demonstrated hunger and yearning to go deeper with each other and find ways in which they can grow in those relationships as adults with children or not with children. But that was a huge positive sign, and so we were very excited. That was our first encounter when we started. More effectively inviting people into leadership roles, including training and equipping. Putting great ideas into action and working to bring them to fruition. One of the things I heard prior with leadership and staff and council and stuff is, we're that 10% church. We get 10% into something, try to push it down the road, and then we that's where it stops. So we want to get you to be the 100%, where you kind of continue those ideas to fruition. Because you got great ideas, you get them going, and then it kind of fizzles, or you downgrade your expectation. So that's a great opportunity. Understanding its DNA outside of Pastor Brian's role and influence, and that's a core part of my work with the transition team now going forward, is how do you claim your culture, your DNA, that is you. Not Brian, but what has happened with Brian's leadership and you together to create that DNA as it is right now that is yours to own. Drawing people into a deeper ownership and participation of the various ministry opportunities that are provided. There's a lot of talk and celebration and proudness of the ministries that are going on, but not necessarily, it's more vicariously that you live through some of that stuff rather than actually being in the trench and rolling up your sleeves and doing it. Again, you're not alone in that, but that's another opportunity for growth. Model the need for change as growth and learning potential versus loss and failure. As I mentioned, that's a huge, it's a challenge, but it is an important need. So opportunities, things that you see that are out there for you, leveraging the fact that CLC is seen as a more progressive faith community with a focus on social action and impact. Both Rick and I would agree, and talked about it a lot when we were here last time. This is an incredible asset that you have, that you need to just claim and own and move that forward as a positive for what you can do to make a difference within the Visalia and greater community as being that place, that oasis of that kind of action and thinking. Work towards a newly articulated missional narrative or identity that reflects the whole of CLC as well as what it imagines for its future. This is the work of the transition team going forward. Work to discover more collaborative opportunities for living out your mission. You don't want to be a silo in the midst of Visalia, but where are those places that call you into deeper relationship and action? Embrace this moment as an opportunity to see how God is going to work in and through you in new and bold ways. That's where you stay on the don't worry, everything will be all right, knowing that God is at work here and there is something stirring as you think about what's next for your future. So that's good news. All right, any questions about what I shared to you? Again, this will be in written form. This is in e-file form or hard copy will be available. But any questions, thoughts about that? So you can start with.
Thanks, Jeff. Some of you I have not met, and so I want to introduce myself, and sorry for the redundancy of introducing myself to those that I haven't met. My name is Rick Heltney. I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm a part of an executive search firm called SIMA Partners, S-I-M-A. I'm not going to explain that acronym to you, but let it stand at that. I've been doing this work for 18 years now or so, and have been serving all kinds of different churches and denominational representatives, and so I'm excited to be here to do this. This is my second trip here. Jeff and I were here a number of weeks ago, and I participated in two things. I participated in the listening sessions with a lot of you, both as individuals and in groups. And then I also met with the staff, and I'm going to say something about that. But part of our work as search consultants is that we have a proprietary assessment tool called Motivation Code, or M-Code. And it's a way of looking at human behavior and human giftedness that helps us predict how people show up in their work and in their life. And I took all of the staff through that assessment and spent some time with them, and I'll tell you more about that. So that was my work here in my listening. So now I'm back because we're going to launch the search or call process of this endeavor. All this has been set up to get into the actual searching, finding, assessing, and eventually calling of your next senior pastor. If you were in worship today, I'm assuming most of you, or if not all of you were, the call committee, and thank you all, I don't know if you're all here or not, but thank the call committee for stepping up to the plate and responding to Bob's little, Jeff, you're going to have to come up here and do your password. Sorry. Responding to the call, the impulse of God through those who got in touch with you. So that's where we're at. And I'm gonna have my first meeting with the call committee right after this meeting. So we are really on the front end of that. And we're excited to get going. Sorry about that as we do this. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this, this search process. Sorry, here we go. First of all, I want you to know that we've done this all over the country, and we most of all believe that in today's world, we just can't wait around for candidates to sort of come to us. And we have to be proactive, and we have to get out there and connect with people across this country to find the right person. The second thing I want you to know is that we are doing this in concert and partnership with the Synod. They're fully aware of our presence in this process. We've had a conversation and email exchange with the assistant to the bishop, who's going to be kind of the resource person. And we think we've designed a really great process that's going to use the best of our efforts and also the guidance and input of the Synod. So we're going to go out and start looking for that person that God is going to call into this place as the next senior pastor. And we'll work with the call committee today to walk through that process. And I'll just say that some of what I'm going to share is going to be potentially altered or added to based on the work of the call committee as they begin to come around some of this stuff and think about what does the next senior, or you call yourself lead pastor, right? The next lead pastor of CLC look like? That's how we talk about it. What will that person look like? Not physically, but how are they going to show up? What will they do really, really well and love to do? What we're going to do with that call committee, one of the first things is have them help us identify what we call an ideal candidate profile. So we're going to have this profile, this ideal candidate, the next lead pastor. No one's ideal. No one's going to hit 100% of what you'd love to have. And I'm here to tell you right now, Jesus isn't available. Okay? Just let you know that. But we're gonna work really hard to find just that person who fits as well as possible. So here are some things that we heard that are going to really inform the search and what we're going to be looking for. The first thing is focus for the future is to build on the strengths of the congregation that have been established under Brian's leadership, but with a need to establish and embrace a new and more missional direction. So we don't feel like it can be business as usual for any church in America, but think about who are we, what have we been, what are the strengths here, and how can we be engaged in this world in new ways that impacts one another, impacts the community, impacts the world for Christ's sake. So that's what we're really looking for, someone who's going to do that. A person who's going to inject their vision into the vision that's going to come out of the work of the Joshua group in terms of what's the preferred future. And then we're looking for somebody who's going to come in and really look at that and say, all right, folks, this is what we could really do. This is what we could really be about going forward into the future. And so it's all this work that we've done together, that you all have done together, and then this person's going to come in and really help to bring it forward. They're not going to be the savior. They're not going to be the solo leader. It's a person who's going to come in and really help this place grow into what God is calling it to in the next phase of its history. You've had a remarkable run under Brian, and this person is going to come in and build on that into what's next. That can be really scary, because I ask the question sometimes, like, what if some things didn't look like anything you ever imagined before? And people are like, yeah, I don't know about that. That's a little scary. But I want you to kind of be willing to think about some things, some aspects of this place might look different than you never ever imagined before. So there's also this sense of we want to engage a younger generation and families, and we want to really craft this well-integrated missional engagement in the community. So here are some things we heard you say about this next person. This is what you'd love to see in this person. Now, this is a short list. It might be expanded. We're going to ask the call committee to prioritize these things. But here's some things that we heard you say. One, someone who is highly relational, who initiates connection, comes to know people personally, extends love, care, and grace. Okay? We'd love to see somebody like that. We'd love to see a biblically centered preacher who is relevant, engaging, personable, and theologically articulate and astute. Okay? We'd love to see somebody who's able to bridge the gap in this community, outward toward the community, but also bridge the gap of the realities that there's, this church, as Jeff has described, has a progressive element to it, and yet we know that's not universally shared. And there's in every church in this country today, there are different ways of looking at the world and looking at life and looking at social issues, both in the church and externally. And we want to have somebody who can really bridge those gaps that exist. We'd love to have someone who is forward-looking and imaginative, but also aware of the correct pace of change for the organization. Someone who can look at what's being done now, what has been done, look toward the future with imagination, but bring about any change in the right way, in the right timing. So somebody's got to have some sensitivities around how does change happen here and what's the right pace of change. Someone who is motivated and skilled in empowering the people for ministry, including staff, lay leadership, and members. So someone who isn't doing it themselves, but someone who really is able to identify and empower people into those leadership and ministry roles. And then finally we heard this, that the person who comes must be committed to doing all things with excellence. There are marks of that all over this place. What does excellence look like? And they need to be committed to and able to do that. So those are some basic things that we're really looking for. And what we say is the best evidence of future performance is past performance. So we're going to look for people who've been doing this sort of thing in their current setting or even in different settings. Here are two things that you said. These are direct quotes from people that we pulled out that I thought were really marvelous. The next senior pastor is the one who, I don't know if you remember we asked that question or had you finish that sentence. The next lead pastor is the one who seeks after God's leading and effectively communicates that to the congregation. So it's someone who is deeply rooted in seeking after where is God leading us in this place, and then bringing people around that. Then the next senior pastor is the one who loves deeply and cares, but is driven and courageous in shaping the future. I thought that was awesome. Does that sound like the kind of person you'd be looking for? I hope so. The last thing, two last things I want to do is just let you know about the work we did with the staff. And this is just to let you know. So we took the entire staff individually through this M-Code assessment. I met individually with each one and we talked it through. And then we met as a group and talked about, well, how we're motivationally gifted, what does that mean for us as a staff? Because part of what we want to do, we don't only want to look for somebody who fits into the position, but we want to look for somebody who fits in with the existing staff as well. Now that staff's not going to be here forever, but they're going to step into this place and they're going to need to work with those people. A couple insights. First of all, this staff is very committed and motivated to working as a team, to collaborating, to serving one another, and to serving you. That was like the highest motivational theme that as a staff existed, this team orientation. The second thing that was there, kind of secondarily, was the staff that is highly motivated to complete tasks or endeavors, who are designed that way and to meet the challenges along the way. So it's like, okay, we have this thing we want to do, we're motivated to make that happen, bring it about, and meet it. And if challenges arise, they don't dissuade the staff. They look at those and say, we can move through those and bring this thing to where we'd like it to be. And that's really a good design in terms of all the staff. And I'm not going to go into all the details of what makes it that way. The one piece that I would say, where we love to see a greater presence in the staff, and not that this is a negative, this is just we'd love to see more of this moving forward, and that is a greater presence of individuals who are motivated as visionaries. Now, I don't mean visionary as someone who goes up on the mountaintop and gets God's word and comes back and tells everybody, but someone who thinks about possibilities, somebody who can imagine what could be out there, potential. I have ideals and bring them to reality. It's someone who can kind of see what could be and then know how to make that happen. We'd love to see more of that in order to make a more significant impact. So that's what we're hoping for in this person that we're bringing, and we're going to bring that all together. The next steps for us, like I said, we're going to meet with the call committee today. There's also a meeting on Thursday night with the call committee, and the synod assistant to the bishop is going to be here, and I'm going to join that meeting via Zoom, and we'll make sure that we're all on board together with that. I have a person who's acting as a researcher already, putting together a list of possibilities of folks we can connect with, potential candidates, and all that. So we go from here. We'll put together what we call an opportunity profile, which becomes a document that we can send to people and have them look at, who you are and what you're looking for, and hopefully that's going to generate some activity. And then we'll walk along with the call committee as we design the interview process as we get closer to people. It's not going to be tomorrow that you'll have the new lead pastor. I'm just telling you that right now. This is going to take time. This is going to take effort. This is going to take wisdom and discernment. Most of all, what this is going to take is prayer. And so we, and on behalf of the call committee, invite you to be in prayer about this, to be praying for that call committee and praying for that person who's going to be here to come and join you and lead you in the future. So thank you for that. We're excited to be doing this. We're going to take any questions that you have about process, about insights, whatever. If you have questions, we're going to take some time to do that. Anything you'd like to know from us? Yes?
So how many placements have you made in California, say in the last 6 months or any? And number two, have you worked with the Senate before?
We have not worked with the Synod before, right? In the last 6 months, we've made one placement in California. We work nationally.
Yeah. California is tricky. Getting people to migrate here as opposed to migrate.
Right. We understand, and we take great care to understand the context. And not only California, but the Central Valley of California and Visalia, we know context is really important. And so we sort of start here and expand concentrically. But here's the thing, we have a network of pastors, ministry leaders, other folks in seminaries and elsewhere who can help us extend a national reach and find the person who is doing really well somewhere else, but is a cultural fit for this place. That's really important, and we understand that. Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to go like they used to do, bring them in for church?
That's going to be a decision of the call committee together with the Synod in terms of what that end game process looks like. So I don't have a question of what that final step is going to look like, but that's likely so.
You used to have 3, 4 in a row.
Yeah, exactly, I remember those
I couldn't
days.
hear the question.
The question was, are you gonna have the final candidate come in to preach, so people can hear that person?
I have a question regarding age. I know oftentimes people are called our second career pastors. So, is that a very taken into consideration at all? I mean, the idea of somebody coming, coming down, wanting to retire.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we're gonna talk to the call committee about. Oh, the good question. Are we considering age, and are we thinking about a second career pastor who might be early in their ministry career, but a little older in age? The call committee, that's one of the conversations we're gonna have as we think about our qualifications. So I don't really have an answer to that. I think what we need to look at is what we talked about, what the growth areas are, what we'd like to see happen, and then talk about, well, what sort of age and life, more, I think about it more in life stage, is gonna really help this place move toward its preferred future. So that's a non-answer question.
I've only been here for a year as a member. You almost have to have a pastor before you do this, because there's a lot of things that go on. And also a pastor that's very interested in figures.
So, is that a very taken into consideration at all? I mean, the idea of somebody coming to young.
And you can't do that, you just gotta have somebody that's followed up.
So that, this is more of a statement than a question, but I'll turn it into a question. The question is, will we be looking for someone who's got a decent level of business acumen? I'll call it that. Yes, but we know that that's not the primary thing a senior leader needs to do. And then, wouldn't it be good if we found somebody who is really interested in children, young families, younger people? And I would say yes, yes, and yes to that. Could be a parent themselves. Yeah, could be. We can't restrict. We can have our laundry list of desires, and then we'll hit about 80% of those. Exactly.
I can't hear the question over.
The question is, it was a statement just about that idea of young families. If somebody coming in that has a young family is gonna elevate the possibility and probability of engaging in their families because they're in the community and all that. And I agree with that. We're gonna look for all of those things, but we're gonna look for the person who's the best fit to lead this place going forward. Other questions?
Cross-pollination, you mentioned where we can pollinate from other organizations or other congregations. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, yes, I'm just gonna kind of broaden this out. We asked the question, and don't get alarmed, this was simply a question, is would CLC be open to someone who is not an ELCA Lutheran? Because there is, and Brian, what's the term? It's not it's not common community, there's another term.
Pulpit and altar fellowships.
Pulpit and altar fellowship with other denominations. Presbyterian, PCUSA, Episcopal, UCC. But we only asked the question because, Moravian. But we asked the question only because that's a reality. And we're not saying anything about it other than, here's the one reality. The one reality is the pool of ELCA pastors in this country is shrinking. And there are people who might be aligned theologically and in terms of polity with an ELCA congregation. And that's all we're saying is that it might be worth looking there. But if the call committee and there are conversations like, no, we really just want somebody who is an ordained ELCA pastor then those are marching orders. Anybody who from outside of that would have to go through an ordination process or a credentialing process with the ELCA, and there's all kinds of things that we need to do to make sure they'd be a theological fit for this place. But that was a long answer to say it's a possibility, but we simply asked the question. There has been no resolution about whether this place would be open to that. So is that fair?
We're already there, though.
We're already on cross-pollination because we have other people who are employed here who have come from other churches. As far as acceptance of our people, that very good.
Yeah, so the statement is that you've already had staff that have come from outside of the ELCA, or you said other churches, but I'm assuming you meant the ELCA, that have been affirmed and accepted.
Other
Yeah.
denominations.
And what I wanted to add to what Rick said is we had a conversation with Pastor Amanda from the Synod, and we talked about the fact that we have Rick here and we have this capacity to go outside the box, so to speak, but broaden your search nationally. And they affirmed, Amanda affirmed, that they're already doing that, so to speak, whether they are or not, but they claim that they do talk to their Episcopalian friends, their connections, when they're looking for candidates. So that's already in their practice, so to speak, but it's just something that could come in play. And what we heard as we listened to you is that find the candidate you feel fits what we're going to need that would best serve you, and then let us decide. You know, don't bring them in because they're this, that, or that, but because they fit that profile that you feel is going to be best serving for you in your future.
But there's more conversation to be had about that, so that's the kind of final. Other questions? Yes, Brian.
So the synodical process has a cumbersome step or element to it where they have to fill out, the call committee has to fill out this ministry site profile in order then for the synod to begin trying to match the congregation. To what extent do you use that ministry site profile, or are you even concerned with its production?
So, great question. This ministry site profile, the call committee will complete, and it really is a ministry site profile of this ministry site and what's here and some of what has already taken place. So that's going to reside with the synod, and it ends up going into the nationwide ELCA system so that ELCA pastors will see that, and we will use that to, once that's done, we'll use that to also inform how we talk about this place. So they're basically out in the general public are going to be these two documents: our opportunity profile, which we're going to put together, which is really just in narrative form. It's very narrative. It's telling the story of this place and what the opportunity is here and what you're looking for. And then there's this ministry site profile that resides within the Lutheran system. But you know, once the call committee completes that and in concert with them, we'll be looking at that and using that and seeing are there elements that we really should be articulating and communicating to people. So there's sort of an official role for that document within the synod and across the ELCA, and then I guess the unofficial role is it'll help inform us to talk about this place.
And what we learned with our meeting with the synod rep, Pastor Amanda, is because we talked about the work we're doing is this opportunity profile is really the core of what they would think the MSP is for, but from Amanda's perspective, it gets you in the database system. Without filling it out, you're not in the database system. Being in the database system means you get exposed nationally to any pastor who might be thinking about a move or wondering about a church. But what we've established for protocol is any possible candidate goes through Rick and the call committee and the funnel they've created for vetting a candidate, so that that process is honored in the work that is being done, and the Synod is totally on board with that. And so those candidates may pop up, but they don't if you're not in that MSP database system. So that's the fundamental purpose of it.
One of the values we think we bring to the table is that we are going to go seek after and identify, seek after to engage people who aren't necessarily looking, who aren't out on the street. I don't want to say that way, but I do.
Soon to be out on the street.
Yeah, so, you know, we want people who are happily engaged and doing a great job, but they would see this as a great opportunity for ministry. That doesn't mean that people from within the ELCA, that's not true for them, because there are people thinking about, you know, maybe what I've been called to do in this one place is, you know, reaching the end, and maybe I ought to be thinking about the next place. So, but, you know, again, that's why I say we don't just put out a, you know, word and then wait for people to come to us, but we really try to actively seek those folks.
What's the current average tenure of the ELCA pastor?
The question is, what's the current average tenure of a senior pastor, lead pastor at ELCA? I really don't know. I will say it's much fewer years than how long Brian's been here. But do you have a sense of that just off the top of your head, Brian? Do you have any?
I've never read anything.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't even want to guess, but it's certainly, I'll say this, across the board, this isn't just the ELCA. I don't believe we're going to see the day where pastors go to congregations and stay for 25, 30, 40 years. That's not the new reality.
That really wasn't ever reality.
Well, I mean, if you look around at certain, you know, so yeah, there have been people who stayed for very, very long times. That's not necessarily true. But I just think it's just, so here's my sense. My sense is that in a place like this, especially where Brian's been here a long time, there's maybe some expectation that the next person is going to come and stay for a really, really long time as well. And I think we just need to temper that. If somebody does come and does really, really well for a really long time, that would be great. But we can't expect that.
And growing up as a ALC Lutheran pastor's kid, back in those days, my dad moved us every 3 to 5 years. I hated that, but he moved us every 3 to 5 years. 5 to 10 years was seen as a long tenure. It's more common that people have stayed longer than those days. But as Rick said, it's more of the exception that there's been a long tenure like that. We're working with the church in, I can't remember what the code is. This is the only call that pastor's ever had, which is very similar to here. This is Brian's only call, correct? Associated and senior. So you're giving us a lot of learnings about to that place. Yes.
So I'm familiar with using the Synod or their process, but it sounds like this is parallel, I guess, when you guys find candidates. Do they have to go back and be approved by the Synod? Because it's my understanding they kind of narrow down the candidate before we even see them.
In our conversation, she asked about the Synod. She talked about, and asked the question about the Synod having to narrow down any candidate that comes to them. What we have worked with the Synod when we had our conversation is that regardless of the candidates they receive, the process that Rick establishes with the call committee is the one they will use to narrow down. So it all goes through Rick and the call committee here.
But at the end of the process, any candidate or candidates that are deemed to be, let's say the finalist candidate, they do have to go back to the Synod And basically, they have to confirm that they are in good standing with the ELCA, that their credentialing is all correct, that their ordination is in place. So there is kind of the, you know, the checkpoint there where they'll do it. But we'll be communicating all along the way with the Synod on that. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Is there guidance from the Senate regarding the pay?
Yeah, good. Is there guidance from the Synod regarding the pay? Yes, there are compensation guidelines that the Synod puts forth. Although we're having conversation right now about this place and what are the specifics and all that stuff. So they will help with that, but in the end, it's CLC that you know, generally within those guidelines that determines where that compensation, including, you know, all the elements of that, not just salary.
Okay, we're gonna, I'm mindful of time, so if you do have another question, please, you can come to Rick or me after this. We're gonna be moving into our second round of meetings. Rick's gonna meet for the first time with the call committee. I'm gonna be meeting with the transition team. I want you to, I'll quickly let you know that there are next steps in play. So here's what's next. So the call committee, as Rick said, they're going to meet with him. They're going to deal with the work he puts them through. They'll work on this MSP to fulfill the guidelines for the Synod, get you in the database. Rick will be doing this candidate search. You probably won't see Rick again on site because that's not where his work's going to be. His work's going to be out there. The vetted candidates will be vetted, finalists presented, candidate identified, brought to the congregation. The Synod gets involved to make sure they do background checks, that they fulfill the requirements of an ELCA rostered status pastor, and then you issue the call.
All by January 1st? What year?
As Rick said, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but in anticipation, and so you don't worry, there's process in place, steps in place, but the steps have to happen. You can't bypass those steps. The launch, the mission, what I'm going to call transition team or the mission narrative team, we're going to meet today. We're going to be hosting some fun stuff coming in the future, bringing in some community leaders to help us learn more about what's happening in the trenches of the greater Visalia community. We're going to bring all of you together for an event like this to do some brainstorming and learning from you about what is it, the DNA you want to hold on to, what can you imagine in the future, develop a mission, vision statement, not redo it from scratch, but kind of re-fortify what it is and how you articulate yourself and roll that out. And all that work is going to make sure you feel comfortable about how you understand yourselves and talk about yourself, so a candidate can really enter into that and become a part of that and know this is the culture I'm engaging with. This is the culture I'm going to be a part of, because that'll be important for them. So there's steps in place. I'll be back a few more times. So you're not done with me. And if you have questions, please feel free to come up and ask Rick or myself, or in the future, the call committee will be identifying a chair. If there are questions that you might have, don't go to Brian. We'd encourage you to go to the chair of the call committee, so you can get good information. They'll be charged with communicating consistently, so you're brought up to speed on what's going on. Same with the transition team. If no further questions, go in peace and serve the Lord.